So welcome to this session on technological innovation in squash. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jethro Binns. I was a former professional player and then founded Squash Skills in 2012. Went on to become a co-founder of Squash Levels about 5 years ago with Richard, and then more recently we've launched Level Tech to explore opportunities also beyond the sport. I'm very delighted to be joined by an expert panel here. So we've got Lee Drew from World Squash Officiating. We've got Markos Kern from lim.io, or many of you will know as the interactive squash banner. And then we've got Gorski from Sports Data Labs. So I'm going to dive straight into the panel and get going with a question for Lee. I'm going to talk about refereeing and then the use of AI in refereeing. So Lee, first and foremost, where are we with refereeing and how have you used data over the last few years to inform the direction that you want to take refereeing?
So my mic doesn't seem to be working very well, but
That's fine.
I don't really need one. I normally break microphones and speakers. So basically, I feel like with squash as a general rule, I feel like we're quite innovative and always looking to push boundaries, and I think we've been doing that for quite some time with regards to refereeing. So we have the iPads that I'm sure anyone that's been watching sees the referees using, and there's a system called Squash Ref that then links into all of the back of the website. So when you go onto the PSA World Tour or the PSA website, you can go into the back end, and within there, all the decisions are collected. So basically, you can see the average decisions per match in an event. So you can also see the percentage of strokes, the percentage of no lets, the percentage of yes lets, and stuff like that. So it's constantly generating all this data that the referees are actually inputting into the system, and then we've been able to look at that and look at what we consider is a good event, or where we think there's problematic sort of matches where, you know, all of a sudden, well, back in the day, if we go back to, I remember a couple of matches sort of around Canary Wharf, and you're talking a match that was going horribly wrong on traditional courts. You were looking at maybe 115 decisions or something like that. And then a match that was going wrong on the glass court, you were looking at, say, 75 decisions. And whereas now, if we're watching matches and we think that something's gone wrong, and you look at it, generally you're between maybe 45 to 50 decisions. So there's a lot of information that we've been collecting the whole time that's actually working in the background to help us give feedback to players or to referees or to use ourselves.
Great. So we've got the mics up now. Everyone hear me on this one? Yeah. So I know you've been looking at the development of IntelliReferee and utilising AI technology. Now I think, you know, from what I've heard and what I've seen, I'm going to share a clip, it's got potential to really revolutionise refereeing for it. So I'm wondering if you can share where we're heading with that and what we've got to look forward to.
Well, I guess obviously we all know that refereeing is contentious. We know that squash is highly subjective, so there's a lot of grey areas, and it certainly creates a lot of debate, whether you look at it in a room or online. And we've always been looking to try and resolve that, to try and make it as clear, get some clarity where we can. And we've done testing with sort of Squazer, where we're looking at sort of ting calls and line calls. So we're looking at those different aspects, and one of those things is the IntelliReferee work that we've been doing. Now, what that is it's an AI system, and basically it requires just one camera at the back, and it measures 15 or so different parameters. And what we've looked to do is break down the rules and try to turn it into a mathematical equation. So basically it's constantly working out what's going on. And what it will do is and I'll show you a clip in a second, but basically you've got the skeleton of the player, and you can see the way they're moving. You've then got the different angles and the distances, and you've got the speeds of the player. Now basically you can then start to override the system where it's maybe learning, and then from that it starts to learn and it starts to adjust. So we're at the point where, if Adriana, if you show the clip.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was quite quick. Do you want to do it again, just so everyone can see? It's a quick game. So if you look, basically it's measuring, so you can see it's obviously got the skeleton of the players. It's then got them looking at the ball, the distance to the ball, and the different angles. And it's reading the depth as well as sort of the side and the speed, etc. Now, what I've spoken to them about is moving this on. Can we have a percentage of how clear a decision is or not? Because we all know that we can look at a decision and all of us come up with a decent rationale for a decision, but come up with different decisions. So what I've asked for is, this is 55% a let ball versus 45% a stroke. Things like that. And then the other thing that I've asked for, if you look at that clip there, if you're looking in the professional game, if that's being given as a stroke for front ball interference, I would override that because I think there's space for them to hit. If it's being given for swing interference, then I agree that on the follow-through, he would probably hit him and it's a stroke. So what I want to see from it as well for the referees is to be able to see what kind of interference it's being awarded for so that you can start to make the decision of whether you override it or not. Now, in the first instance, you would see something like this sitting with the video referee in the background, but then of course there's a lot of scope for this to move forwards, and it will probably get to the point where you can have a camera at the back, you can have an app, and two players could be playing and it will come up with decisions for you. So sort of get rid of that argument and the fighting on court between your friends and stuff like that. So in terms of this program, we've got the World Tour finals coming up very soon, and IntelliReferee are actually going to come across and will sit in the background and look at decisions. It will be set up, look at decisions, and then be able to override it where it's getting it wrong, and then start to obviously get that learning process happening.
Fantastic. I mean, it looks incredibly exciting. So I want to move on and introduce Mark Gorski from Sports Data Labs here. So Mark, I think it's probably worthwhile you giving everybody a little bit of background about the company, and then if you can go on to talk about the scope of athlete data, what it potentially means for sports in general, and then obviously we'll get into the details around squash.
Yeah, that sounds great. So first off, thank you for allowing me to be here. So at SDL, we provide technologies that empowers the individual, if you're an athlete, a patient, anybody, to be able to collect, control, and monetize your data. Our view is that your personal data is very valuable, right? We think that down the road you'll look at your data like you look at your car, your house as an asset, right? It's what powers healthcare, it's what powers insurance, it's what powers sports betting, other areas. It's all driven by data. So we're building a platform that will allow kind of more control by the individual, because ultimately if you look at where the law is going, it's going in a way where it's very supportive of individuals having a lot more rights over their information. So we're building technologies to support that. We started the company about 10 years ago. We started in squash, so squash was kind of our first test case. And we ended up, we started with the collection of real-time heart rate. I can actually, if you don't mind, show a few slides if that works. And the goal of what we were trying to do in squash was really around the idea that athletes' data had predictive value. And we were trying to find out if we could actually collect data that proved that athlete data had value. So we put a system in place that was collecting real-time heart rate from players over 3 years based on their consent. So we had a system that would talk to sensors in live events, bring that information in, clean that data, and present it in a way that had value. That was the first time we had done that, and as we kind of went through it, found quite a few issues that we had to solve for, one of which, there were always these incomplete sets of data. One thing that we actually did was created a AI-based model that basically would predict what the value should be, and we then built and generated the artificial data to then fill in those missing gaps. So, but just to give you a little bit of kind of background on the work that we did with the PSA World Tour, we collected heart rate and HRV data from 21 events, 796 total matches, 2,498 games. We collected it from 44,982 points. Total number of players was 92. Total heart rate readings, 1,669,000. Same with HRV. So we ended up building essentially what we call these digital maps of biological responses for each player. So we knew on a point-by-point basis what physiologically was happening with their body and what the outcome was, if they won a point or lost a point. And we ended up training our models with a variety of statistical data, lots of data that's we would call more event data, so things that can be observed or gathered without the use of sensors and systems. We ended up then augmenting that data with physiological data. So we basically looked at about 19 different parameters tied to the heart. Looked at heart rate, HRV, looked at different windows, looked at spikes in HRV. If you think about HRV compared to heart rate, HRV is really kind of the unconscious tell of what's happening with your body, right? So unlike heart rate, which you can control, HRV kind of tells a little bit more about what's going on. So we were able to show that compared to using kind of just these traditional stats, when we incorporated heart rate and HRV, we were able to predict win-loss winner of games with roughly a 10 to 15% absolute increase in accuracy compared to just traditional stats alone. So over the course of about 1,300 games after the first point played, our system was predicting win-loss winner 84% of the time correctly, using their heart rate and HRV compared to just traditional stats alone, which was about 64% of the time. So you think about kind of the value that athlete data can have and the opportunities that can come from things like this, it's significant. So.
Great. Well, I think we'll probably dive into that in a little bit. I want to just move on to Markos. Many of you will know Markos and will have seen his company, Interactive Squash, over the last 8 years, I believe. But without diving too much into Interactive Squash, I think we've all seen it. I'm interested to get your thoughts on the state of the squash market and your perception of our appetite for innovation and investing within the sport.
Yeah, super interesting. Do you guys hear me on the mic, or do you want me? Perfect. Yeah, like you said, we're in this for 8. Who knows Interactive Squash? Okay, good. Then I skipped the introduction. I came from complete outside, so I know all these people by now from my first AGM, I think in must say 2000. We just figured out it's way longer than we thought. And it's really, really interesting because the last couple of years there's been a massive shift. We came in as the outsider and we said, we have this idea for tech, and everybody's like, no, please move on. But we believed in it, and now we're seeing a certain shift just from the time that we've spent in the market. People are realizing, okay, this thing actually works, or they're actually actively looking to engage. And just this event here is fantastic because you see people are motivated to look, what do we need to change to achieve something, instead of we're fine, the others just need to understand. We've been challenged with situations where we brought in the first prototypes of interactive squash into a very successful squash center, and people said, take it out. There's too much non-squash players coming in. It's loud. We don't like the people. The dressing rooms are full. We don't know these people. Leave. And we're well, this is the people that are going to be paying the membership in 5-10 years. This is fresh blood. We don't care. Go. So the last couple of years, especially the last 2-3 years, we've seen a massive change, which also comes a little bit with a generational change of the people managing these clubs. Unfortunately, not too much in the UK, to be honest, but everywhere else, really cool new concepts. People setting up new facilities. Hey, you go in with a chip card. Let's get rid of the whole, you need to be a member, whatever, and there's a restaurant, and there's hey, just 4 squash clubs. You go in, you swipe a card, you go play, you bring your people, you can book coaches on an app, and we're just going to charge you, and this is really feasible because once per day somebody comes in and cleans, and that's it. We've seen people like bringing in complete new audiences that would have never even thought about picking up a squash racket, not just with our system, but also people actually addressing these people instead of like, no. So there is a very, very noticeable change in mindset that is accelerating also due to these kind of events, obviously. So it's very, very, when we started, like, most people always said, like, don't go into this market. By now people are like, it's good that you did it. It's like, it's just a question of a couple of more years that we had to, like, just keep asking the same questions. But it's looking good.
And what's the impact been since the Olympic news, and how has that actually impacted your business over the last 6 months?
The last, drastically. Like, we get about 3 to 5 times the amount of inquiries for interactive squash courts. We're getting inquiries. It used to be like, oh yeah, we're really thinking about this, and we knew it's like a 2-year, 3. People reach out and it's like, we want to buy 5 courts. We're going to just distribute them over the country. Just put in the budget, thank you, because money's coming, like, we know this works, which basically goes hand in hand with us having proved that this getting new people, like, who operates a squash court here? Who's offering children's birthday party packages? 4. When we said that the first time, people were like, but we're a squash club. Now we have, like, the record is right now, we have one operator who makes 190 grand per year just with 1 court euros, not Turkish lira, with children's birthday parties. And those people, like 10-20% of those come back. It's not just kids wanting to play. He starts with throwing arrows and balls, and at some point somebody's like, give me a racket, I need to be faster. So these kind of shifts have accelerated drastically because we've basically built the groundwork, and now people with the Olympics are like, okay, we're going big, like, give me all my tools. So for us, this is super, super interesting. And also with other things, like, people are very much focusing on what needs to be done on the management side and stepping a little bit away from that conservative ego, going like, okay, what are the others doing? We should really think about it. Like, we should probably do some social media and not like Facebook, we don't need it. So it's a really, really positive and very, very energizing time.
Good. I think we're all glad to hear that at the commercial level, at the grassroots.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back around to Lee and just talk about how far you think this technology can go within telereferee, and, you know, do you ultimately see it suggesting decisions, or can you see it going as far as us just having an AI referee?
Having a hologram.
Maz, just in a hologram form.
I mean, it's less people, less person, well, less of a chance of arguing with someone, I guess. But
some people still try, though, right?
They'd be swiping at it. No, I think there's always going to be an element of interaction and match management and communication. I think what it will do, though, is it will reduce grey areas. And, you know, so quite often I'll be, if you're watching it on TV or whatever, and you can see the differences in terms of if you're watching live from, say, the side of the court, someone plays a drop shot, you see where the 2 players are on the court, you see their movement, then they're never ever going to get that ball. All of a sudden it comes back as a stroke, and everyone thinks it's a stroke with the camera angle, sort of the depth of the court lost. Whereas things like that, where it will actually work out distance to the ball, speed, angle, direction, everything like that, it'll be a lot clearer. So it will remove those sorts of grey areas, and I think there's probably quite a high percentage that it will get rid of. So I think in terms of replacing a referee in international events, no, because I think there's the element of the human element that's required. Communication, match management is crucial. But in terms of tidying it up and maybe creating less debates, less arguments, more clarity, I think it will go a very long way with that.
Great. And I just want to look at WSO slightly and think about the opportunity to educate at scale, because some of the conversations we've been having about upskilling facilitators or educators, I think maybe we're missing the opportunity in leveraging technology to do so. So just maybe you can talk about the WSO platform a little bit and how you're using that to educate and upskill at scale and the opportunities it presents. to the wider audience?
Well, it's an online platform. It's trying to sort of bridge gaps, get communication out there, so communication between players, between referees. It's about creating consistency and standardization as much as possible. Obviously, you've always got that human element where some people will think of a decision versus someone else. But what it is, everything we've got, there's online products, so it means that people can just go on, do a course, look at it and get that knowledge. And we've got certificates for players, we've got courses for referees, and it's, I look at the player certificates, for example, and it was done in a way with a coach's mentality using the rules, because I know when I was playing as a player, you think you know all the rules. Went into coaching and commentating, of course, you think you know all the rules. Then when you actually start to delve into it and start to become a bit of a student of the rules, you realise how much you actually were missing, the gaps you were missing. So when these player certificates were put together, and all the PSA players do it now, if they do it properly, I think it would help you to become a better squash player in terms of sort of common causes of interference, things like that. But it's accessible for anyone, and the idea was to make it as affordable as possible, and for it to act as a tool so that it's a network that then anyone can tap into. It's a hub for people to tap into and a resource to sort of build that communication.
Absolutely. No, I think it's really important that we do lean into that technological offering to upskill and educate and bring people on a journey and create community going forward, especially as we lead into the Olympics. Mark, I want to come back to you and wonder if you can explain where you think what this is going to mean for squash players and squash fans, what we're going to be seeing over the next few years as a result of the work you're doing with Sports Data Labs.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look more broadly kind of at the trends that are going on right now in technology, obviously a lot more data being collected, right? There's an understanding around the human body today that hasn't happened before, and that's only going to get deeper in the next 5 to 10 years, right? We're in this moment of time where the sensors are getting better, there's more information, there's more contextual data, so data that provides context to other data to say why things happen, and building those models. You look at kind of the health space 10 years ago, it was around subsets of individuals. So if you had an issue, they would look at your profile, age, weight, height, with diabetes that runs for 3 hours, per week, let's say, and recommend things based on that. You're starting to see a lot more personalized understanding of the body, and that's definitely starting to take place within sports. Now, if you extrapolate that with kind of what's going on with the law, and we spend lots of time on the law. We have a lab in the US that's focused on looking at the legalities tied to collection and processing and use of this data, not only in the US but outside the US. It's very clear where this is going, right? The individual person as an athlete will have more control over their information. So, and that's not really how the data's been commercialized today. I think there's a lot of data that's being sold by different clubs, by leagues, by other groups that probably infringe on rights. If you look at kind of the discussion today around ownership and athlete data, particularly here, right? One of the criteria to own something is a right to exclude, and under the GDPR, right, there's a right to access, a right to port, and that's a right that you can't contract away. So, by law, the individual will always have rights to access their own data. That means that a organization will never be able to say that they own data. It's only going to be the individual. So, starting from that basis, I think you're going to start to see a lot more opportunities with athletes to use their athlete data, should they so choose, obviously based on their consent, to do what they want with it, right? And particularly within squash, the idea that this data can obviously be used to engage fans, can be used for a variety of things. I mean, one of the kind of hot areas is really using data to predict outcomes, right? And as we've shown, that's kind of probably the tip of the iceberg with how this data can be used. But you look at the monetization use cases, and it really, again, starts with the athlete, and it has to be athlete driven. So, it's for this data to really be exploited in the right way, it has to be driven by the athlete. And that ultimately means that the athlete's going to be seeing, I think, a larger portion of any commercial opportunities, which may not be in sport, right? If you look at kind of, again, trends within healthcare, they're starving for elite human being data, right? So elite humans with elite levels of, elite levels of different types of things that they can use as baselines for different studies. And that data in a anonymized format has a lot of value. So we're working with a couple hospital systems now in the US on that specifically. But within squash, I think you're going to see a lot more commercial opportunities for athletes. I think you'll see a lot more kind of opportunities to really use data in different ways. So
that's incredibly exciting. Just want to talk about the agile nature of squash, because we are relatively small compared to other sports, but it means we're able to be adaptive. And I know you work with a number of major organisations, which you can allude to, but just wonder maybe you can share your experience of working with the PSA and how the small nature of the sport has also been an advantage in some ways.
I mean, huge. So we work with the NFL Players Association. So we're the monetization arm for NFL player performance data. We supported FIFA Pro, which is the FIFA Players Association, essentially. So 66 unions, 65,000 players. We supported them on the Women's World Cup last year, doing a few things. We worked with the PGA, the ATP. So we've worked with a wide variety of groups and sports. I think the PSA was the first group that really kind of went down this path with us. It was a very new concept around collecting data in live events, getting consent, and commercializing it. And not all players were comfortable with that, but really kind of gave us the opportunity to not only prove out the model, but also prove out the value of that data. So I think you're already seeing a lot more groups that are interested in squash, not only because of the agile nature of the tour, but now with kind of the exposure with the Olympics, huge path ahead.
And a similar question really to you, Markos, in terms of the different areas that you work in, the different sports you've had communication with over the years. How do you find squash as compares to other industries?
Well, squash is quite different because it's a much smaller group. Obviously, that makes it much easier. So we have a different product which is called multi-ball. You also see it at the event. This goes into all sorts. We go into tennis, into soccer, we've built the world's largest interactive LED wall in New Zealand for having like the All Blacks and FIFA teams train and stuff like that. I think the agility is always like very packaged up in these little pockets. The good thing is here, the overall package is much smaller, so you find these little pockets like the PSA, and we've been doing really quick and like 6 weeks before the Swedish Open. Come on, let's do it. Like, let's pack it up. And this is fun, and it is a driver of change. And that's something that hopefully also these kinds of events like will fuel even more, because generally governing bodies are there to obstruct. This is something that most people misunderstand. Governing bodies are like, let's keep things as they are. This is their job. This is what somebody was like, we just invented this game, basketball, and they're doing it this way. Let's make a governing body like they're not supposed to do it this way. So it's really, really hard to get that mind shift. Is like, no, let's think entrepreneurial. Let's like try out things. Let's do something and fail. This is like the exact opposite what these kind of constructs were built for. Is like, no, let's protect. Let's make sure we don't spend too much money. Let's make sure everybody who says that they are a coach, they went through us. So it's really, really hard to come as like, hey, let's rethink things. And I've written a book about this. I'm doing my research. No sport has ever been static. The way that we play tennis today, if you played it 100 years ago, people was like, what sport is that? So this change somehow is needed in a right amount. And that's the danger. Like, if you want to change everything all the time, you're not going to be around long, but you need to have a healthy relationship with risk, with trying out things. Most of these things happen on a personal level. That's what most people misunderstand. Even if you work with FIFA, it doesn't matter if you have 25 different like working groups about that. In the end, it's one guy going like, hey, I like these three guys, and hey, I really believe it. I'm going to take the risk because everybody has a job. It depends on their success. So it's just this big construct of things depending on each other. In the end, it's a personal thing. 99% of the time, it's somebody sitting with somebody, I like you guys, let's do it. And we've had good luck and good success with this, not just on the governing body side, but with the simple centers, like 3 Swiss guys saying, we're going to build a squash court, we just play squash, it's cool. Like, let's open a center. Who do you know in the squash world? Nobody, but it's fun. Up to, like, and there's so many, like, nice characters. So I think it is a value, and it's still, to be honest, not used enough within squash. So, but I'm very positive just with the things that I answered before. With that history, now the Olympics, like, people are getting hungry for it.
Absolutely. Well, that's where I want to go next, is obviously looking towards the Olympics, and ask each of you, it's a bit of a group discussion, how you each think we can use technological advancements over the next 4 years to make that Olympic showcase something truly special. So, I mean, maybe Lee, do you want to kick us off?
I mean, I think obviously the refereeing one is quite clear because it's very contentious. I think the more you can tidy that up, the better. So I think it's quite obvious on that front. I think it's, you know, listening to these two guys and thinking about how adaptable squash is, and sort of I think it is a bit of a leader in the market with certain things. And I think if it's about combining, because there isn't that sort of endless pot. So I think if we're, you know, combining all the different things that we bring to the table, then all of a sudden technologically, it's easy to say, isn't it? Yeah, it will all advance and move forward significantly, where you've got something that looks very cool. And I think for me, it's about using technology to sort of change that stigma or image that's associated with the game, whether that's back in the 80s and 70s and that type, because people still view it like that, and it's very different. You know, you watch the product online, and if I listen to Mark talking, it's right, you know, what amazing feats do these athletes achieve, and then actually, you know, how can we jazz up what's happening on a course, and how does it engage sort of these new people that come in for birthday parties and things. And I think there's a real, you know, combined effort to make it actually go, well, actually it's quite a cool sport rather than the old stigma.
Absolutely. And Markos?
I'm going to shock a couple of you guys here. So just to give it a little bit more framing. So I come from the startup world. I've always been doing a lot of big brand work. I've been traveling around the world. I've been working with really, really big companies. I chose sports for a certain reason, because first of all, it has meaning. And looking at all the other sports that we have, I don't think, or all you should get accustomed that you have something on your hand which is highly versatile, very athletic, very fast, very easy, very flexible sport on your hand. Get used to that, it will change a lot. A lot. I'm talking about, don't think that in 15 years the same referees with the same rules will be playing on the same court. We're now in the biggest change of human history when it comes to technology. You guys have something on your hand that can be the first hybrid sport. If you're thinking about futuristic movies, watching like Total Recall in like 50 years, do you think they're going to be putting a little band around around a racket and saying like, and we're going to try to hit this and we're going to try to hit that, and it's going to be a nice line on the wall, and then we're going to go have a shower? No, it will be something that will be merged with technology. Not just on the way we portrait it, not just on the way we track it. My guess out there, it will be something that's half digital in the experience itself. Like future athletes in 15, 20 years will not be competing who hit that thing above that wall. They will be competing with something that's half digital. And squash can be one of these sports that do it the first. And it's a transition phase, so you don't have to be scared. We're not doing this next year. But we're already looking into, and we found like the tests that we do, what happens if you take a real professional squash match and you add it with gaming elements not like hitting monsters, but like hitting timing. Like we've just created a prototype that is like fixed timing matches. We take everything that you guys are commenting on perfectly well, but we give it a fixed timing. Because why? Because the system is there. And if you're to serve and you take 10 seconds longer to serve, you know what? You get points deducted the next person serves. And stuff like that, like putting even more chess into squash than it already has. All the tests were done, people go nuts. They love it. It's like you put what's already on steroids in terms of like that experience, and you turn up the volume. So just throwing it out there, maybe think about that and probably not be too afraid when it happens.
Sounds fascinating. And
Sounds easy if someone else is playing for you.
So Mark, I mean, same sort of question, but really, what do you think we can expect to see from some of the work that you're doing by the time we get to the Olympics? You know, from a fan experience.
I mean, it's when we were doing our stuff with the PSA. I mean, the data showed that these are some of the fittest athletes in the world, right? And you're seeing that a lot more time and attention, particularly in the U.S. now, being spent on exercise, on fitness, on other areas. So there's a really, I think, exciting story for us to tell in the next 4 years as a lead up around the sport itself, right? It's clearly growing a lot in the U.S. right now, but the idea that there's data to be captured and shared in a responsible way that can help grow the sport, I think that's really where we're going to kind of play a part in the next few years.
Cool. I think we all know that, you know, we're competing against paddle and pickle, as we've talked a lot about this morning, but we're also competing against Netflix and Tinder and whatever else it might be that is taking people's time. You know, and fundamentally, we've got to make this product as engaging as possible to draw people onto the squash court.
Tinder, jeez. That's tough. That's tough.
I mean, who's he thinking about?
I wasn't talking about myself. I'm very happily engaged. Thank you.
I love it.
It was actually Markos who planted that seed the other day. So
I stitched him up.
This isn't being recorded now, this one, is it?
I mean, if Markos has got that power, we're all going to be buying interactive courts, aren't we, by the time we leave?
Date guaranteed. But it's true.
I guess, yeah, well, Markos, I'm going to throw this one to you now. You can get yourself in trouble.
So who has a Tinder profile?
But I want to get your take on how we can leverage technology to pull people away from screens or other activities or whatever it is we're competing against.
Yeah, I mean, that part is something that I've always said to many sports governing bodies, is like, they always look left and right, and it's like, yeah, but tennis is struggling like hell as well. They're having problems getting young people in there, and if you look at the demographics, even soccer in Germany, we've never had as many people in Germany being signed up for soccer schools till the age of 14. We've never had, since the 70s, as little people after 20. Because you know what, then as soon as the parents take over and there's like, now you're allowed to decide for yourself, there's like, cool, give me the iPad. Like, I'm not going over on the other side of the city to listen to that 60-year-old guy tell me to dribble a ball around plastic huts. I'm going to be watching YouTube and following the idols that I have. So it's always very, very important to understand the time that we're in and embrace technology to basically be able to compete with these experiences. Because there is fantastic experiences out there that are not sport. And the way they trigger, and it's in the end why sport, and this is where it comes together so drastically, ironically, is people started doing sport because sport does something with the brain and the community and the dopamine, and I've just won a match and I'm the head of my peer group, like all these things, but now other people are moving in. It's like, you can do that without your body. So we're losing out. And if we don't integrate these things like connectivity, like you need to step off a interactive or a squash court and be like, I want to show the world right now that I'm ranking the 2,500th best in whatever it is. And even if it's just pressing the wall, whatever it is, people need to have that connection, and we need to be able to feed into these systems that are now dictating all our lives. Most people are afraid of it. I'm actually saying this is such a good thing, and this is super exciting time, because we're like learning a new language. And instead of sitting there, it's like, this is... So embrace it as much as you can with all the little elements. We've seen that with interactive squash, it works insanely well because it's big, visual, and it has an impact. Like if you put, and this is how the children's birthday parties work, they don't work because they make so much money, it's because every kid goes off court, is like, Mama, this was really great, can we go there when the others are not around? That's how it works. So this children's birthday party, it's great if you charge $200-300 for it. But these 10-15 bookings that will come the next 2 months, that's actually where you really build also like discipline, and like then they come back and then they try again, and at some point they say, would you ever want to try with a coach? So embrace these things and make it work in the current time. It needs to be a fantastic experience.
You must be finding that with squash levels as well, though. It's the same type of thing, isn't it? Because anyone can get a level and then they can compare it to anywhere in the world where they can travel around. So it must be a similar thing to what Markos is talking about.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we're kind of gamifying the process. Again, it's obviously a game, so it's already a game, but we're gamifying it further. And then by giving people stats and data, people love stats and data, and if they can go on court and know that, oh, I've improved 3 or 4% as a result of playing that last match, or get frustrated by the fact that they've gone down by 0.5%, even though they won 3-2, we're driving that engagement, and it is fascinating to see the data and the engagement around squash levels. I think we hit this sweet spot between accuracy of the algorithm, but also making sure people move enough. So the email open rates are ridiculous, and
so that thing, I really want to log that into everybody's brain, because that's a quote that we can like say in 10 years. Gamifying the sport is as weird as it sounds. It's true. So very nice.
Guys, I'm aware there's a brilliant panel here, and I'm sure you've got tons of questions. So I'm going to stop there and open up the floor. So, Alicia.
I just had a question about sort of esports. As many people probably knows, it's in the European Games. The esports is taking the world by storm, and it's a huge challenge, I think, for all sports. Where do you see whether squash somehow can be a part of that, or, just your thoughts on that?
I think it's super interesting. I think we need to step one step further. Esports is fantastic because it's accessible in a millisecond, even on your phones. And this is like something we can never compete with. As soon as you're in the physical world, you need to buy a racket. Oh, that's already an entry barrier. But there will be a certain intersection between real sports and esports. We call it hybrid sports. We work with a couple of universities on it already. There's really insane concepts out there, and if you really start thinking about it, you're like going to be, what does esports really do well? What do sports really do well? What is the overlap that you can put into one experience? And then it gets really interesting.
Can you do that for squash, please?
There's a job for you.
Huh?
There's a job for you.
We're working on it very, very, almost every day.
Just a question for Lee. I just wondered if you got any specific remit or target of how you want to clean up the game from an officiating perspective in readiness for the Olympics. Is that something you've been targeted? Do you need to get the decisions down to a certain point, or thinking it's going to be the showcase of the sport's life, really? And what does it need to look like from your perspective? Have you got any targets around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of elements. I think it's not necessarily about reducing the decisions ridiculously, because obviously, we're in a confined space, it's gladiatorial, it's unique in the sense you're competing for the same space. So there will be decisions, there will be let balls in the game. So despite sort of a lot of people thinking that we're sort of trying to remove the yes let, we're not. It's always going to be there. But I think there's lots of things in terms of the interaction, the match management, and what we've been trying to do to get to that is sort of release things like directives to try and go, look, this is the clarity of you do this, expect this. Try to interact with the referee in this way. The referee is trying to interact with players in another way. So trying to sort of get that consistency and get the communication where it's not just a case of it's always stop-start, everything's being contested continuously, it's contested aggressively, etc., etc. So it's trying to tidy that element up. And then I think there's also that sort of area around, getting the sort of the diversity of refereeing, making it a bit more sort of attractive for people to want to do it, to get sort of, a gender balance between male and female referees by the time we get to the Olympics and things like that. So we start to change the image, because people were saying, well, why don't you have ex-players refereeing? And it's like, well, one, an ex-player doesn't necessarily become a good referee, because there's a whole lot of match management and control and understand the rules that goes with that. But equally, it's about making it attractive enough for people to want to do that. And at the moment, we haven't quite got that balance right. So the sooner we can get to that, the better, I think.
Steve.
Yeah, Lee, just in terms of assisting the refereeing, is there any technologies on the way to help with out-of-court decisions or tin decisions, or areas where it's not clear?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a so that's a bit of a production thing in terms of the cameras. So the more cameras that, say, if you look at the PSA coverage, so Squash TV coverage, at the moment we don't cover all the lines, so you can't get that consistency in going right. That is, we can definitively say that's in or that's not. So it's about the sort of improving the range of the cameras so they can pick up all the lines continuously. And then also the quality of it so that you can tell, if the ball's hit the line or not. I guess you could look at sports like cricket where they use hotspots and stuff like that. So there's
like Hawkeye and tennis.
Yeah, and exactly, and the sort of the Squazer stuff that we were doing at Optasia is looking at line calls, and once that's refined, you can probably get that to the out of court lines as well as the tin line. So it's always looking at that so that we can be definitive with it. At the moment, it's a case of a video referee can intervene if there's conclusive evidence. So if a camera captures it and there's conclusive evidence, they can intervene before it's heard. But at the moment, we haven't quite got it to a point where all the lines are covered all the time and well enough.
Hey, Markos. There are 1 billion people on this planet that are obese. And a lot of those are kids. And your system is only in so many clubs. How do you see the opportunity for digital to scale to more people?
So we have the multi-ball system that's already at the venue, like PSA has one. This has been going really, really well. This is completely different in scale. Like, we're selling 30 to 50 of those every month in like more than 60 countries by now. They go into schools, they go into elderly care facilities, they go into community centers, even store concepts, even like malls, just put up empty spaces, put up 3 and say, hey, you can go in there and play. And this does this a lot already, because the main target that we try to focus also in our overall work is not the squash player. It's not the soccer player, it's not the tennis player, it's people who never ever started. And this is that's like the rest of the 7 billion that did not consider taking squash lessons, did not consider going to a tennis center, and having those people get an introduction and having them hooked. It is highly addictive what we do. Anybody who ever has played on an interactive squash court or on a multi-ball, it's like, you say you want to do it 5 minutes, it's like, boom, that's half an hour, you're sweaty. Because it's like, we just engage you so well on this gamified experience that you don't feel the sports aspect, meaning you're able to go further, which is insanely important with obese kids and grown-ups. Because like, if I give you like a sports routine, after 5 minutes, most people are like, oh. If I give you something fun and not call it sports, you're going to be doing it an hour. The next day, you're going to have to paint this, like what happens a lot there. It's like, oh my God. But in the moment of the experience, we get you completely distracted. It's like, hit the monster, go, go, go. And that helps a lot. And then the last thing, we already shipped the first 400 is the home system. We've developed Limp 1, which is one system. I think somebody already got their first beta version here. Yeah, him. It's still like in development, so we're now in beta, like getting out the little nuts and bolts, but we're preparing to do this on large scale, and this will be below $2,000 to buy. It's gonna have the same capability, and there we're really talking about like every school, like where do people move, let's go.
Hi, a question for Mark, coming from a medical background. One question for me, quite important, regarding the integrated heart rate data and how we interpret to the players, to the coaches regarding the intensive effort during the game and also during the rest, because there are differences in the recovery heart rate,
Yep.
but also especially distinguishing women and men,
Yep.
especially in some circumstances such as just around the period and the heart rate going up, and also affecting the game and the preparation as
Yep.
well. Can we optimally use and utilize those data?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the plan going ahead, right? I think we're in discussions with the tour on a variety of things to really kind of provide, I'd say, a higher level of care for the individuals, right? So, but we really focused, given our business was very young, looked to really kind of put more attention initially on the commercial uses of that data. I think for us, we were, at the time, we raised some money, but that was really kind of for us a main focus, was to be able to kind of prove out the use cases for it. Now we're starting to do deals with hospital groups, with insurance groups, with other groups that are definitely wanting a more longitudinal set of data. So looking at the human body at a point in time and then how it kind of evolves, right? So for us, collecting that data over time is very important. So yeah, so I mean, we're the plan is to be working more closely with hospital groups and the tour on providing a higher level of care for players.
Just reflecting on yesterday when we had a talk about the skateboarding and the concept of sort of mastering the tricks rather than the outcome and so on, and also trying to meet the demands of the younger generation where arguably they're not going to sit through a 60-minute game of squash. Do you think in the future our game will evolve to be more judgmental? So, for example, sort of timed 5-minute sort of rounds as such, and then maybe having 3 judges who would judge on a sort of an entertainment point of view in terms of trying to attract the younger generation? Do you think our game will evolve that way in time?
I would even take it one step further. I think just like with gaming, there will be a lot of different varieties and people will find their niche. Like you will have people who just played for fun but will become really, really good at one thing. Like we're already having like mini tournaments in Monster Squash. Monster Squash is Candy Crush with a squash racket. But they're already like having their weekends where they say who can get the highest score. So I think this will evolve pretty organically because we will very quickly see once the data shows like what people want to do, where they want to position themselves. And the format itself, this is why I said everybody needs to get used. The format will be either changed or challenged by completely new things. Right now we have one center and they're like considering like, do we have a proper club tournament or do we have a monster match championship? And the funny thing is if they think about, hey, we need to have a prize for that monster match thing, it's easy to get a €1,000 prize for the first 3 people, like, a nice hotel voucher and stuff like that. They find sponsors easy, very easy. For the classic, they're gonna be like a couple of 40-year-olds playing squash, nobody's interested in that. So there is interesting dynamics.
I would just add too that, I mean, I'll just say the game's built for sports betting, right? It's a ideal game for, given the time, given the points, given how prop bets are now being created and, used. One idea is that the game will shift based on commercial use cases, right? The idea that the tour can generate a lot more money to then be able to put back into the sport. I think you will see considerations like that, not necessarily within betting, but within a commercial realm that may dictate some changes, the next 5 to 10 years, let's say. That's just my opinion, not the tour's, obviously.
Yes, and there's one here as well.
Quick question on the data. So you must have absolutely amazing data. It's an amazing sport, brutal sport. Just that translation, maybe with the, informatics, the way that you then get that message across and how different it is from other sports, what you gain from doing that sport. So dry data is brilliant, and it's brilliant for scientists, but just to get that message across, and I imagine getting that message across could be those kind of data points, or there could be those moments that people who don't know about the sport suddenly realise what an amazing sport it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be turning our attention a lot to injury prevention, to optimization for players. Again, we've focused historically on commercial uses, but are obviously with kind of where the law's going, with the player being at the epicenter of their own data. One of the first uses, and the first use is, how is it valuable to me, right? And again, we started with commercial, but obviously the idea of using this data to help them play better, to help them understand their bodies better, to help them train smarter. That's really kind of the first use. So yeah, we're spending a lot more time on that. Again, we're starting to work with hospital groups. We are never going to be experts on the human body like hospitals will, right? So, if you think about what we're building, it's the Google Play Store for a lot of these groups, where we, with the league or group, allow them to build on top of us. So we really have expertise in AI-based collection, in cleaning, in generating new synthetic data, in consent management and monetization. So yeah, you'll start to see, I think, a lot more healthcare and hospital groups play more in sport. I think one of the things that you haven't really seen is hospital systems spending a lot of time in sport, and that's largely because there's so much cash being made in healthcare that it's not really worth their time. But again, now that more data is being collected, now that they view these athletes as elite human beings, not just athletes, they can serve as a baseline for lots of things. So it's quite interesting.
Absolutely.
As a really quick one, there's a nice article put out by Nathan from the PSA a couple of years ago. This is really interesting, where the first time we tracked everything, and then he compared it to a tennis match. So that answers your question, because the data itself, we were like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I think it read really well, and it was amazing, but you have to go into detail, but there's ways of illustrating that, and probably different social sets are more into. So it's just that visual and also up-to-date way of getting this information across, rather than just an article where you have to read through it and get the details.
But that will come once we do it more often. Yeah. So.
Or PR, how can we use a squash player versus a different player? Can we translate it to everyone's talking? We still use the Forbes article, So I just jumped in.
Which is awful.
Yeah, which is awful, and we need to. I mean, it's unbelievable that we haven't used more data to create more talking points that we all use. I mean, and I don't know if Markos has any data that, or any learnings that can boil down to 2 points that can replace that article that we're still using everywhere,
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, this is the final question because we are running out of time, Adrian.
Yeah, so obviously, interactive squash has been hugely successful in the UK, like Centre Parks, but I think Centre Parks is quite specific compared to clubs where you've got kids going there maybe once a year. It's brilliant the first time, but then they don't go back for another year, whereas if you install it at a club, obviously, they all start off great, these interactive courts, but have you seen with the clubs that they've managed to sustain that with the kids? Because at the end, they've still got, kids now, no attention span. Yeah, they can only play monsters so many times before they get bored of it as well. So have clubs still managed to sustain that long term by installing the AI course? Has it been like a brilliant start off and then it's kind of dropped off or not? Like what has it been for clubs around the country?
So first of all, there's more than 60 games on the system right now, so it gets really easy to keep people engaged. It still is not the magic thing. We've had clubs where they just we bought it and it's not working. It's like, well, your receptionist doesn't know and doesn't offer, and but once you really get people on it, it organically grows really well. And the funny thing is, a lot of the places are now either starting with one and getting one system later. The Centre Parks are now in their second wave, so they're taking second courts right now, transferring them. It is very easy once you drive it, and once you keep the content fresh to keep people engaged. the social element to then put on top and have like a screen at the receptions, like this is the leaderboard of our figure 8 challenge, just within the court. Like these things obviously then drive it really, really, really fast. So you still got to put in a little bit of work and open the door and make it accessible. But so far, none of the systems has been taken out because people don't use it.
Maybe just have one last point.
Since we're talking a lot about data here, has there been any thought on a universal rating system? You've got Club Locker in the US, but Squash Level here, Dutch have like their national ladder. So any sort of thought around how we can consolidate that?
I mean, that's what we're trying to do, in all honesty, with squash levels. I think we're in about 30 different countries at the moment. We're continually having conversations with multiple federations all around the world. The Dutch system is already connected up, so it's very much part of the conversation. So Kevin and I need to sit down after this and have a chat further about the potential integration with Club Locker, but that is ultimately the goal. I mean, there's a vision here where we can get every single squash player onto a platform knowing how good they are. You think about the opportunity that presents around improving seedings, improving a European junior circuit where people are going into events out of place because of a ranking, and where you've got an opportunity to get everybody matched up in the right place. It's going to ultimately lead to better competitions at a grade level. It's going to drive more engagement amongst the amateur players. So it's very much the goal, and we're working with, alongside PSA, World Squash Federation, and all the federations to try and achieve that. So, yeah, watch this space.